first point, just to start out on a very positive note, a friendly note, Marco, is that I concur with Joachim that this is incredibly timely and an incredibly important thing to have. I cannot count the number of instances where we're forced with the need to talk about some basic stuff about public financial management and budgeting, where we would always go back to these 1990s publications and would find them wanting for all sorts of reasons, not because they're not interesting to read, but maybe the biggest difference is really that all of a sudden you have an edited volume here that is full of references. I mean, each of the individual chapters all of a sudden has cross-country quantitative evidence to look at, detailed case studies, all sorts of things. And if you just look at the years of the publications of these things, there's hardly anything that was there in the 1990s. So this attempt to turn this into a little bit more of a discipline where people use certain things as points of reference, and there's a community of scholars that who are looking at this not just from a perspective of public sector economics or from the perspective of the legal profession that thinks about budget laws and all that stuff, but public financial management as a subject that is of great interest to the real world, really. This is a major step in that direction, and I think it's only appropriate that now, a couple of years after the outbreak of the financial crisis, all of a sudden we have two major volumes, this and the as you would probably call it, the other book, the International Handbook of Public Financial Management that is going that came out virtually at the same time, and this is going to make lots and lots of people's lives a whole lot easier. I'm pretty sure that Joachim, when he's preparing the budgeting course at LSE, is now rejoicing about having a couple of basic references that you can just point to, whereas before he needed to. There you go.
Yeah, no great surprise.
The one quibble that I would just like to point out is that I think there's a little bit of a tension here between what you talked about as innovation and the other one, which is the however emerging architecture. I think the first sentence of the book is that if there's one word to describe PFM over the last decade, then it would be innovation. I think a lot of the nuances that you brought out in the presentation, and also some of the points that were echoed by my co-panelists, are that it could have just as easily been fad or fashion. Some of these innovations are maybe not quite as innovative when you look at them from a global point of view. I don't think that is necessarily that there always needs to be a place where you talk about things that are new. There's another place where you talk about the things that are canon, if you will, and that are really just the essential building blocks of what we understand public financial management to be. Now, if you do the one, then I think you have a little bit more space to be argumentative, to set out your case why this is a good idea or why that is a good idea. And I think that programmatic agenda setting side of things is quite strong in the book. It's also a very, very nuanced argument and a very nuanced treatment. I don't think anybody would read the medium-term budgeting chapter here and say, now we must all go out and do medium-term budgeting, to the credit of the authors. But there isn't, if you look at architecture as the metaphor, we hear a lot about the chandeliers and the nice windows, maybe not so much about the basement and the plumbing. There isn't a chapter here that says, if you just wanted the barest bones budget system of them all, what are the couple of things that you need to be looking out for? And there's, I think it's almost how the question is how is this going to be used, rather than what was the original intention of the authors, because inevitably in practice a lot of the nuance that came out of the chapters might get lost in translation, and then someone else might look at this eventually and say, well, we're talking about building blocks here. So fiscal rules are a building block, medium-term budgets are a building block, performance budgets are a building block. But as you said, for instance, transparency or the plumbing and some of the budget execution stuff is not in here. Is that almost inadvertently sending a message that these things here are more important than some of the other things are. Now, if the emphasis was more straightforwardly on innovation, then I think that would be a simpler case to make, that you can just assume some things as basic that need to be there, and it's a right to just focus on the frontier issues. And just very quickly, one last point about I think it's very interesting from the perspective of development and developing countries that the book makes a very strong case, I think, for just getting rid of that distinction. That there are lots of what used to be middle-income countries like Chile, like South Korea, which are now at the forefront of innovation in public financial management. There are some other more old-fashioned European countries which are probably now getting a treatment that a lot of developing countries have been used to for a couple of decades before. So these boundaries are disappearing and are maybe being replaced by something which is much more appropriate and much more sensible, which is to say, right, you're a country that is suffering from conditions of structural austerity. If that's what you need to do, then what are some of the building blocks of your PFM system that you would need to get rid of some of the inefficiencies that you have in your system? If you're a country that is mainly suffering from an abundance of natural resource wealth and you're not really structurally constrained in the same way, you have young populations, but you're incredibly worried about probity and control in your public sector, then what would some of those design choices for institutions be like? And this is probably not going to be the final answer. There are going to be other additions to what eventually is probably going to be a growing library of publications on the topic, but I think it's very exciting that we're moving into that space now to have these kinds of conversations.
Thank you.